Welcome. Let's begin with the paper analysis for the 2023 exam that was held today for essay. Now this essay paper comes in two segments. One is section A and other is section B. We will discuss all the 8 topics of essay that were released this time. So let's begin with the very first one, section A. In the meanwhile, if you have any questions or queries, feel free to post those in the comment section, and we would be happy to take your queries as well. And for any queries or concern, feel free to connect with us on the given number. Now the very first topic that was released for the essay this time, under the section A, there were 4 topics. All 4 of them were really interesting. The first one was thinking is like a game. It does not begin unless and until there is an opposite team. Now this is such an interesting problem that whenever we are trying to bring a solution to something, when would we bring the solution? We would bring the solution only when we have the problem with us. That means there has to be an opposite team for which you are working, and therefore thinking acts like a game. And this is nothing else than that you have to explain here. You have to focus on the concepts of problem solving, the ideas of algorithms, how the algorithms work, and how can you simplify a complex issue by actually playing it in a form of a game, in the sense that you are trying to understand and bring a resolution to a given problem. And of course, that is what has been the part and parcel for this question. Now, as we proceed, in case you have any questions or queries, feel free to ask back. We'll be more than happy to clarify each and every topic as we proceed. The next topic here is the visionary decision making happens at an intersection of intuition and logic. Now, be it, let's take an example from government, politics, let's take an example from science and tech. Anywhere there has to be an idea where logic meets with intuition. I take a very simple example from Steve Jobs' ideas, where his idea was to develop something different in computing. So that was an intuition, a sixth sense, but it had a logic how it would be more user friendly for the people, and that was it. The similar example we can cite for let's say the scientific advancements. The similar examples we can cite for a government running its functionaries. So unless and until they have a logic why they need to do it, there cannot be a good platform where you begin with, and this logic has to be intersected with intuition. I take a very simple example. Let's say there was a famous Marbury versus Madison case in US under the idea where they were trying to bring in the ideas of the Constitution. So the standing of Supreme Court from United States in this case was really interesting. What was the idea here was that there were two basically opponents who were there for the election. So there was a political rivalry between John Adams versus Thomas Jefferson, and Supreme Court actually held a stake. The idea was that if Supreme Court, let's say, I put it in very simple words, I won't go into the details of that right now, but the idea was, let's say there is a law A and Supreme Court says that this law is void, but the ruling party prefers to go by law B just because this is in anger with the Supreme Court. Now what would happen? Probably this law B is more worse than that, and it could bring a incorrect decision for the society. So therefore Supreme Court rules out the functions that law B would not be brought into acceptance, and that is what is idea under judicial review, to always keep a check on the legislative and the executive. So this is something that we need to understand, the kind of concepts that you need to bring under visionary leadership. So visionary leadership not just embarks the idea under the formal leadership approach, but it is in a wide spectrum. When we can apply it to science and tech, we can apply it to government and politics, and to various other disciplines. The next is a very interesting topic, and this topic says not all who wander are lost. Now, this is an interesting idea. There have been numerous people who have succeeded in their life, and they have succeeded by exploring things. Let's take an example of Dr. Kalam. He took the rocket on the cycle. The day he took the rocket on the cycle, he wasn't aware that we would have an institution like ISRO, which would be the path-breaking institution in India and across the globe for scientific and space missions. Now, this is a very good example where we can say not all who wander are lost, because if that was the case, this idea could have been lost, but this idea actually proved to be the basis for various other developments. Similarly, if we talk about authors, if we talk about English literature, there have been numerous such instances where quotes have been cited talking about soldiers fighting for world wars, soldier fighting for independence, and their experience helps to create a solid base for the world and the globe to exist. So that's another example where we can explain that. The last topic for section A this time was inspiration for creativity springs from the efforts to look for magical in mundane. That means if something is very boring, isolated, even in that, if you can find a magic, and that is what is a real imagination for creativity. So the idea is how you can open up new frontiers, new possibilities. So to pay attention to minute details, understand the developments carefully, have to be open-minded. We need not be restricted with our own limitations and ideologies, and only then there can be a scope where ideas can actually flourish. So that's another interesting aspect that has been discussed. Now, the section B was really interesting. There have been lots and lots of interesting topics, and it's really difficult which one to choose to write. So 4 of the topics, I'll pick the first one. Definitely my interest area, I could say. So education. Now, education is what remains after one has forgotten what one has learnt in the school. Now, if you come to this point in life where I am, probably you might not remember who was your class teacher in class 2, 3, 4, or what subjects did you study, and within what subject, which poem did you studied in English or Hindi. So, you have actually forgotten what you have learned in the school, but this education still remains, it still instills. The idea is the ability to solve the problems critically, to come to a solution, to develop a decision making power, problem solving power, to help yourself communicate with others better, to develop a way of getting an informed decision. So that's what is the basis. You learned how to cycle in your childhood. Now, even after 20-30 years, if you are given a bicycle, you can actually ride it. Why? Because you have forgotten what you did that time, but the basic aspect, the skill set still remains, and that forms the basis of your learning. The next interesting topic is girls are weighed down by restriction, boys by demand. Now, this is a real problem of today's world. When we say girls being weighed down by restriction, these could be restrictions in all form. It means you require girls under certain glass ceiling effect where they need to be obedient, disciplined, not to go out late, and so on and so forth. So those are societal restrictions. But when it comes to boys, there are numerous sorts of demand to earn, to have a livelihood, to get a good job, to be well placed. But both of these, if they move to their extremes, they are harmful. And that's what is the basis for this question. Now, good examples we can cite here, the recent suicide events for getting a quality education for youngsters, not getting a job. Those are some of the instances where we cite that heavy demands on the boys' side is harmful. Mental ailments cropping up because of these kind of issues, another important aspect that we need to focus on. So those are some of the things that you must take into account. The next interesting topic is A society that has more justice is a society that needs less charity. A very important thing in times of elections coming up. I would say the idea is a society which is just for all, which provides good, safe drinking water, education, health, infrastructure, does not need to do charity, does not need to provide freebies to the people. And that's when we say a society has more justice. If it is more just, then there is less need for a charity. Now, when I say more just, you can include things like raising the minimum wages, expanding the healthcare facilities, making healthcare affordable for all, bringing in policies which bring in racial equality, gender equality, protect environment, development of the young and the youth of the society. So those are some of these. And the last but not the least, another really important topic is mathematics is the music of reason. Sylvester's quote, a very, very famous quote, and this quote and this education quote was actually given by Albert Einstein. I forgot to mention that. But yes, mathematics is the music of reason. Now, there is a very close-knit relation between mathematics and music, I would say. Why? The simple reason being, when it comes to music, you study sounds, you study rhythms. When it comes to mathematics, you study shapes, patterns, symbols. So both of these require three things in common. One is creativity, the second is imagination, and the third is discipline. With creativity, imagination, and discipline, either of these streams can actually bring the real version of it. So if we talk about mathematics, let's say if we talk about Pythagoras theorem, where I say the sum of the squares on the sides of the Pythagoras triangle would be equal to the area of the square on the hypotenuse, then what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to bring in a reason to understand this pattern. The same would happen for music. So if we talk about musicians like Mozart, the most of the calculations and the concepts of music theory are based on mathematics. Similarly, in mathematics, when we talk about any series, sequences, if we talk about Fibonacci series, for example, they are based on series and they are based on a very vast and a very basic concept that you must understand. So these 8 topics that had been today for the UPSC paper were really, really interesting, and the kind of explanations and the ideas that you can put in each of these we have discussed in quick summary. If you are looking to get into the complete answers and explanations for the past papers, the types of questions, the topics that have been asked, each of them have been explained in detail here. So you can refer back to the kind of essays, but note the type of essays that are coming these days are really different from the essays which used to come in the previous times, and therefore it's really interesting that you have a vision, a knowledge about various things around, and you read newspapers and editorials. Only then you get an insight about what to write, how to write, and some good points that you can bring in your answers. So thanks for joining in today, and wish you good luck for your upcoming papers tomorrow and day after. We will be discussing the papers as they are live. Thanks.